Comedy Film Nerds Podcast.
All right. So I saw this doc, Chasing the Lotus. Now, this doc was given to me by Frank Pulaski when I was in...
Our YouTube editor?
Our YouTube editor, who's been... So all the guys, we've been starting to videotape the show every week now, and Frank is editing them and putting the credits and all that stuff.
So he's typing in your Patreon names.
Your Patreon names. So that's one of the things. At certain Patreon levels, you get your names in the credits.
Right.
So thank Frank for doing
Yep.
that. And one of the fine things you get for being a Patreon backer. So when I was in Maui last year, he gave me this doc, and I just literally, like, we were cleaning the house, and I was like, wait a minute. Chasing the Lotus, and Lindsay's like, yeah, Frank gave that to you. I was like, oh shit, I haven't seen that yet. So I finally got around to watching it.
Lindsay had to remind you who gave you the gift?
Yeah, it was in a stack. I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out
Who could possibly have given me the surf documentary?
about. Well, there's a lot of people who could have given me a surf documentary, quite honestly. But mahalo, Frank, for Chasing the Lotus.
It's funny that you said you were cleaning your house. It's like it was like underneath something. Like you got the gift and you just like tossed it somewhere. It's like deep in
Under
your
a
closet and you're
pile
like
of-
cleaning it out. You're like, what
No,
the fuck is this?
No, you two dicks. We have a bunch of DVDs in our house, like hundreds of them. So it
Yes.
was in that pile of DVDs. It was next to a bunch of very excellent movies, like Rising Sun, the
Sean Connery movie?
no, not Rising Sun, the oh god, no, I'm fucking this one up too.
Empire of the Sun?
No, it was the movie between it was Takashi Mifune and shit, this is the dumbest thing in the world. Oh god.
The Last Samurai. I'm just going to
No,
name
it's just-
samurai
it's-
movies. Yeah.
It's the one where he's in the West. He's a samurai in the West. I've talked about it on the show before. Gary Brightwell recommended
Blazing
it.
Saddles.
Yeah, that's it, Chris. So now we're just going to be assholes. Yeah, Maud. Working 9 to 5, right? Where Mrs. Doubtfire. Mrs. Doubtfire? Hello, is it a katana? Yeah. So
I'd like to see Mrs. Doubtfire as a samurai
Shanghai Noon.
warrior. Be into that.
She said Mrs. Doubtfire is a samurai. Victory comes with the sword in the scabbard. So I found the DVD of Chasing the Lotus from our good friend Frank Pulaski. And it is a cool doc about these two guys that were the sort of pioneers of surf photography and surf shooting surf films back in the late 60s, early 70s.
Right.
And so it's really cool. And they kind of go through the history of surf movies.
And Jeff Bridges narrates it,
Jeff
right?
Bridges narrates it,
He's
and
got such a great voice.
he's the perfect voice for this. And he agreed to do the narration only after having seen the old footage. So then there's cool old footage, guys surfing, and there's footage of like Endless Summer and stuff like that. You know, the budget was $300,000, which that's sort of like, oh, okay, for the doc. So when you compare that back to Slate, it's like
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I was thinking like $250,000 for a full feature film.
scripted
Narrative,
feature
yeah.
is
That's an accomplishment.
Very much so. Yeah, it's a cool doc, and it kind of goes into the history of stuff, and I think you need to be a surfer for this doc. Personally,
Right.
I'll be real honest with you.
Kind of like a fan film for surfers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're interested in surf documentaries and the people who shot them and the early days of that, it's interesting, but it's not like necessarily like Riding Giants is
Brings non-surfers into the world.
That's just a
right?
great documentary, and you don't have to be a surfer. This one, I think.
But now that's interesting because the budget is so low. It doesn't matter. It's one of those movies where you could just preach to the choir on this.
Sure.
There's enough people to support a movie like that because the budget's low. Like, you know, if this was a $4 million documentary, then no, it wouldn't make as much sense. But this is where the economics comes in of filmmaking where, yeah, it's perfectly fine.
It also, there's some cool history about the island of Maui where, so Oahu in the late, in the 60s, it kind of blew up as the North Shore and the surfing mecca, and it became a big, Waikiki, a big tourist destination, all this stuff. So then a lot of these, like George Lopez and some of these sort of soul surfers came over to Maui, and you hear George Lopez talking. He was just like, yeah, and there's guys doing acid and riding waves. And so Maui kind of became, and it still has, these sort of hippie communities, but definitely in the 60s and 70s, it became sort of the hippie counter surf culture.
Huh.
And they were like, one time Hendrix was just out there and he just did an impromptu
know that
show.
was a thing.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
So there was and they were also sort of talking about, the 70s in a lot of ways, we've talked about this on this show, but how the film industry was sort of more artistic, and then how the corporation sort of took over in the 80s. The same thing happened in the surf video industry, and it was about the style of the surfer, and then the shortboards came in the 80s, and guys are wearing neon, and then it was like, the surf companies were paying for these videos that were just basically promotional.
Yeah.
They're just commercials. And so it was kind of going into the era right before that. I talked about that a little, but it's an interesting little film.
Money ruins everything.
Yes, it does.
Is the Lotus, is that a surfing like term? I mean, is that something that
It's a photographer term. And yeah, that's revealed at the very end. It's a photographer term. So they talk about, these photographers were more about the spirituality. Like it was, and the connection with the earth, what you were saying with Red Turtle, the connection with the earth. And it was a unique time in the world, obviously, but definitely in surf culture. And these were these two guys that captured it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I shot first, getting